So, how went the cannon? The cannon assignment? Did everyone get something to move? Starting to infuse some squash and stretch, all that jazz, a little bit? Yeah. Okay, good. You know, that assignment was a great kind of playground for us when it comes to deformers, and deformers are going to be a big part of our workflow going forward. In every sense, today we're going to build upon that foundation that we set last week and look very directly at how we can start creating some skeletal rigs and some deformers that will allow us to give some pretty good articulation across our geometry. While Modus decides to open an update, let's just go over to Canvas real fast, take a look-see at what we're doing this week. We have just a singular assignment, and then we're going to work on something in class today that will help give us a really good, solid understanding of the character rigging pipeline. All right. All right, so I can't believe it's already week 6. Freaking out over here. It's week 6 already. It feels like we just started. But if you look at this week's stuff, here's our assignment. So we're going to be making a basic skeleton, and we're going to be adjusting the paint weights for our skeleton on this green dude that I provided you. So that's the idea. I've given you the actual model itself. You can find it down here at the bottom. We're not going to be working with this initially, so we're going to come back to this towards the end of the class today. At the conclusion of our homework assignment, you should have kind of a basic functional character rig. We're going to put some skeleton bones in. We're going to go in and start messing with all the deformers and their influence of the deformers across all of the joints themselves. And we're going to have something at the end of this week that's actually usable in the animation pipeline, which is pretty exciting. Okay. Now, our journey getting there is going to be kind of tricky, all right? But this is going to be our exclusive focus over the next 7 days, just getting a basic skeletal system infused on our green dude. One thing to note, you're just going to be turning in your Modo project file this week, so there's not going to be a render. This week and next week are not going to be any renders. You're welcome. Yeah. So if you've been burning the midnight oil, rendering things like crazy, I appreciate that. Thank you. You get a little bit of a break. For a few weeks while you just focus entirely on characters, and then we're going to jump back into some traditional animation stuff towards the end of the, or once we're done with this module. Okay. FYI, and I'm gonna lay this little, plant the seed now, as they say. We're gonna have towards the end of this month, we're gonna have a midterm exam. Bum bum bum. We can manage that. It's not a problem. Don't. Yeah. Well, around-ish or so. Yeah. The midterm exam, in finger quotes, is I'm going to provide you guys with a character, and you're going to rig it. Okay. So you're going to go through, and you're going to rig it in class. It's just going to be a race at go, and we're going to come in 9 o'clock. I'm going to hand you a project file that you've never seen, and by 12:30, you're going to give me back a rigged character. Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, yes, absolutely open notes, for sure. Right, yeah, no, I'm not going to expect you to memorize this because I don't memorize this stuff, right? This is challenging content. It really is. And when it comes to this level kind of work, it's impossible to remember everything. It really is, okay? It's not, you have to leverage. It's all about knowing where to go find the answers, not having all the answers, right? It's about kind of going through our problem-solving system to get to the answer itself. This is a deep rabbit hole, okay, and it's got a lot of intense technology that's going to lead us down to some interesting solutions. It's about knowing where to look, not knowing everything, okay. Folks out there in the real world will tell you the exact same thing. And it's like they run into a problem. It's not about knowing how to solve the problem. It's knowing where to go to find the problem or find the answer to your problem. Excuse me. All right. Okay. So we're going to be kind of marching closer and closer and closer towards that final project or that final rig. It's going to be a culminating experience. It's how we're going to conclude our character rigging module in this class, and then we're going to move on to dynamics and particles and all that other fun stuff that we haven't talked about yet. So mentally prepare yourselves for this. I am going to ask you to go through the entire sequence on your own in the course of 3.5 hours. Okay, so, bum, bum, bum. All right, let's get to work, shall we? All right, So we'll come back to the green dude here in a little bit. Where I want to begin today is with a very, very simple mesh preset that we can find in Modo. Because I think the best way to really start to understand how to put all this stuff together is just to do it a few times, right? So here's what I would like us to do, okay? If we hit the F6 key and open up our preset browser, all of my function keys, there we go. All right, so I'm in the Meshes section. Meshes, human, and then way over here we have this lovely hand model. And this is an excellent, excellent place to begin. We're just going to create a simple articulation system for a hand, okay? And it's going to allow us to very directly walk through the steps here. And there is a kind of a little bit of a defined sequence that we need to follow. So I'm just going to double click on my hand, which is going to place it at the origin of the scene. And let's take a looky look of what's going on. So this is the project file that we have. Excuse me for a second while I turn off my Verts. All right, there we go. So it's in the Meshes section of your preset browser under Humans. That's where you can find this hand. Now, upon examination, this is a hollow model like all of our models, okay? You see right down the inside. There's nothing, even though the hand is posed in this really cool little pose, there's nothing on the inside of the hand that's going to determine the deformation of this hand and to make it move. And that's the focus of today, is that we want to go, hold on one second. I apologize. It's a lot. That's right. That's what we want. Okay. So we need to go in and add something. This is kind of the part of the illusion of computer graphics, is that everything for us is hollow. We need to physically go in and create an armature, some sort of internal skeletal system that allows the computer to bend and deform our fingers or our characters in the way that we define. Okay? So we have to go in and add some skeletal joints. There's no magic behind this model at the moment. It's just geometry. It's just polygons. Okay? So let's go into our setup interface or our setup layout and start looking at how we can add a little bit of a mechanical system to the interior of our object, since it's hollow, that will allow us to get the deformation that we're after. Okay? So I've traveled over to the setup layout. And of course, our setup tools are going to be the home for all of this wonderful stuff. Okay? So setup tools. One thing to note, and this is something that's really kind of odd, and they may have changed it in this version of Modo, but actually I think they have changed it. Okay, never mind. I take it back. So where we're going is this skeleton tool. Okay? This skeleton tool is basically going to allow us to create a whole series of joints. And our polygons, our mesh, are going to bend around the general location of all of these joints. I think it's really important to point out that we're not creating bones here. We're creating joints. Okay? If you think about it in the comparison to our own human body here, what are the actual parts of our body that are moving? Yeah, the joints are moving. The bones just come along for the ride. Of course, I have my elbow here. I have my elbow, my wrist, okay? So I can rotate my elbow like this, and then my forearm comes along for the ride. This is actually a static part of our skeleton. It doesn't do anything, right? It just kind of holds some muscles and make it so my arms aren't all like, you know, rubber hoses and stuff. Although that would be fun, right? Just have like liquid arms, okay? So we need to go and create a similar structure, and I think that's an important idea to keep in mind as we go through this, is be inspired by our own anatomy. We want to place joints on our characters in the exact same location as we have joints. You're going to get a much more believable result. So let's fire off the skeleton tool. And then down here in our tool properties, we have a whole bunch of options, but there's one that I want you to look very, very carefully at before we go forward, because who knows who's been messing with the tool set before you, and I just want to make sure that symmetry is turned off. We'll come back to that in a minute, okay, the symmetry section, but initially have it turned off. All right, now I'm going to look at my hand from the top view of my scene, the joints are almost always going to be placed at the location of the work plane. So your initial kind of construction of your skeletal system, in my opinion, should be done in an orthographic view. It makes it very, very quick, very, very easy, and all the joints are going to be aligned to a very similar plane. Okay? Now, we have to do some engineering on this. We just can't be placing joints whenever we want. We have to do some forward thinking. We have to understand what it is that we're trying to get our little rig to do here. Now, for my rig, I just want to be able to do this. I just want to be able to fist, okay? I just want to be able to ball my fingers into a fist. That's the goal for this simple little rig. Now, to get there, let's be inspired by some anatomy. Of course, we have 5 fingers. The thumb is a little bit different than the other 4. Where do our fingers, if we look closely at our hand, if we just fist our fingers real fast, where do our fingers rotate to? Yeah, and specifically, the center of the palm. Everything rotates to the center, right? They're not rotating way out here in the front. Of course, they're not rotating backwards. They're rotating towards the center of the palm. So that location of rotation is important for us to kind of keep in mind, okay? Because maybe we can engineer something that gives us the ability, gives us that ability. Now that we're adding skeletal joints inside of our scene, it's important to remember that what we are ultimately going to be creating is going to be a whole series of hierarchies. Now, we've talked about hierarchies before. Big picture, what's a hierarchy? I appreciate your hand signals, Kevin, and you're absolutely right. Kevin just went and did this, right, on the, absolutely. So let's get a little bit more specific. Hierarchy. Parent and child, I like that, absolutely. So where the parent goes, the child also goes. But what can happen to the child? Can we move the child independently? Yes, absolutely, right? That's a hierarchy. It's a very simple hierarchy. We're going to be building a very complex hierarchy, okay? And to illustrate that, just look at our fingers. We want to be able to rotate each finger independently. Where's the rotation of each finger going to start? Yeah, the top knuckle, this one right here. That's where it's all going to begin, right? So when I move this top knuckle, this entire finger needs to move, okay? However, when I rotate just maybe this bottom part of our finger, I don't want that to move, okay? So in the construction of our rig, we have to kind of foresee a whole series of hierarchies that's going to influence the deformation of our character. So for this, how many individual hierarchies do you think we're going to need to create? 5, right, for each finger. Actually, we're going to create 6, okay? A hierarchy for each finger, okay? And then a central hierarchy that will allow all of the sub-hierarchies to be connected onto, okay? So we kind of have to have a vision of what this rig is going to do before we even just jump in and do it, right? As with all things rigging, there are no super rigs. There's not one silver bullet solution that's going to solve all your problems. You have to engineer your rig to get whatever, to get the solution that you're after, okay? All right, let's go in and start laying down some bones. Now the first, or some joints, excuse me. The first joint that we create is a really important one, and it's so important they've given it its own name. It's going to be called the root joint, okay? Think of it as the root of the tree. All the tree branches stem from that root, right? You have a root, you have a trunk, whole series of branches that come off the trunk. We're actually not doing something too dissimilar with this rig, so let's go ahead and place our root joint. With the skeleton tool on, simply clicking inside the scene is going to get you your first joint. Now, if yours is humongous like mine, cool. If it's not, that's cool too. The size of your joints don't determine its area of influence. More on that in a minute. I'm going to sneeze. Excuse me. Oh, I apologize for the live streamers. That's why I said I'm going to sneeze so people can like mute, their audio for a second. All right, the size of the joints really don't matter. The first one, 9 times out of 10, is going to be pretty big. And once we start laying down the second one, I want to put the second one kind of right about here in the middle of the wrist. Bloop. You can see that things get a little bit smaller, okay? Now, there's a reason I'm putting that second one right about there, okay? If you think about it, our model kind of starts down here. It doesn't actually start in the middle of the wrist. I want to be able to have some functionality in here that gives my animator the ability to bend at the wrist separate from the forearm. So that's really what this middle joint is facilitating. And I think I even kind of missed it a little bit. If you remember the Moto convention here of these little blue cubes, these are edit points. You've seen this with the pen tool and the curve tool before. So whatever one is gold is the active joint, right? And that's the one that we're currently going to manipulate and edit. So I missed the location for this guy. So I'm going to click on it. And then if you just left click and drag, you can interactively change the location of your joint. And I think I want it somewhere right around in there. Now that active joint is important for us to manage and look for, because every new joint that we add into this hierarchy is going to be created after the selected one, right? So we've got to manage it. We've got to manage it. Okay, so I have my root way down over here. I have the second joint. Let's go ahead and drop the tool just for a minute so we can start to take a look at what physically is going to be created over in our item list. Don't worry, we'll come back to this here in a minute. Okay, so if you look at what's been created, all we're actually doing in this moment are creating some locators with some fancy names and some fancy UI that makes it look like joints and bones, okay? If we expand our hierarchy, here's the two that I have. One's called skeletal joint. Unsurprisingly, the other one's called skeletal joint 2, okay? So we're just creating a hierarchy here where the parent goes, the child goes. So if I move this, you can see that the child skeleton joint 2 also comes along for the ride. So at the moment, they're just little itty-bitty, locators.
Is creating parenting automatically? We need to figure out who will be the parent at the beginning and start creating the...
Yeah, you got it. You got it. And so it's going to do all the parenting for us, okay? It's automatically going to create the hierarchy when we start laying down these joints. Yep. So that's part of the challenge. Where do we want to have the root joint? Where's going to be the master controller of this entire hierarchy? You'll see this here in a second when we start doing our skeleton. We actually create a tailbone, okay? That's going to be our root, because the tailbone then goes to the hips, which is going to be the central spur point for all the hierarchies for the rest of our character, okay? So it takes some experimentation. Sometimes you get lucky. Sometimes it doesn't matter. Other questions before we keep cruising? All right, rock and roll. So I have two joints. Let's name them before we go any further. I think you're going to find that in this part of our rigging system, the naming conventions are really, 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 really important, because this is how it's going to name things by default. Just skeletal joint 2, 3, 4. It's not going to give you any sort of context as to the role and the purpose of this joint in the larger perspective of the rig. So naming conventions really, really, really help your sanity. I'm a big believer that we should be actively trying to protect our 3 a.m. brains. Okay? Naming things is going to help, especially naming them as we go, because now we have some really localized understanding as to how this is going to work, or what the role of this thing is in the grand context of our rig. So I'm going to just rename my first one root. Given the previous conversation we had about ZBrush, I want to name it Groot, but we'll just name it root. And this one's going to be the wrist. All right, so now what I want to go and do here is continue to add more joints to this hierarchy. Now this is one of the cool things about working inside of Moto. If we simply double click on the root bone, or the root joint, excuse me, see how it automatically selects the entire hierarchy itself? It grabs every single one of the joints. Now, in order to add additional skeletal joints inside of an existing skeletal hierarchy, we need to tell Moto which hierarchy to place those joints in. So by double-clicking on the root joint, it selects everything, and it makes that distinction for us pretty directly. So now I can just return to my skeleton tool. Bloop. My little blue cubes are back. So I know I'm kind of in the edit mode, and I'm free to add new joints into this hierarchy. Kevin, you had a question?
Yeah, I can't rename my joints.
You can't rename your joints. Is the tool still on? The skeleton tool still on?
Is that what you need to do?
Yeah, I turned mine off. Yep, that's probably what's going on. Yeah, while the tool is still on, the tool properties, let me just do it real fast. So I've double-clicked on my skeleton. I'll reactivate the skeleton tool. When the tool is still on, this prefix and suffix now determine how the actual joints are created upon creation. A role that we can change. Like if I wanted all of my skeletal joints to be like hand, you know, now every new locator that's created is going to start with hand, underscore, and then poof, run away. All right. Okay, so before I go any further, if I wanted to add an additional skeletal joint here, okay, so I want to put one for the palm and then creating each individual fingers, what do I need to do first? Click on the wrist, right? Because we have to have whatever control point is gold is going to determine where the next joint is created from. Okay, so I want to create a joint after this guy in our hierarchy, so I have it selected. And I want to place this next joint kind of in the middle of the palm. And this is going to act as a perfect branching location for all the fingers themselves. If you take a look at what we've created here in the hand, it's a real simple idea. We have a joint way down over here at the boundary of our model. That's the root. We have another one for the wrist, which is maybe going to give us an excellent branching location for the thumb. Okay? Because if you think about it, the thumb kind of rotates. I don't know, if you look down around, I pull my thumb in, it's actually kind of rotating more around the wrist than it is the center. So this will give us a good branching location for all the thumb joints. But now we have a locator in the center of the palm, which will serve as a wonderful branching location for each one of our fingers. Okay? So let's just do it real fast. It's pretty easy. I'm not going to drop the tool. And let's get to work. Okay? So I have my palm selected. Each one of our fingers is going to simply get a joint at each knuckle. So I got 1, 2, the last one I'm going to have to guess, maybe right about there. And then we need to have a fourth. Okay? Now we just can't end our skeletal system at that third knuckle. We need to have a termination point over here by the fingertip. And basically that termination point gives us a point of rotation, something to rotate around for this guy. Okay? Think of these like hinges on a door. Okay? In order to bend this entire middle part, or this entire last part of our finger, we had to have a hinge here. Okay? So I actually have 4 joints going down my index finger. 3 for the knuckles, and then the 4th one at the very, very conclusion of it that will give us a hinge for that last knuckle in our finger. All right, before we drop the tool, let's just take a look at what we've created. Let's go over into perspective. Yeah, there it is. Okay? This is starting to look pretty great. I'm happy with this. Okay? I'm liking the direction that we're going in. However, now comes the big challenge in placing all of these joints relatively in the mesh and at the locations that we want all this stuff to rotate around. Okay? So we're always going to have to go in and continue to edit and refine the location of this to get us what we're after. And I'm just going to do this visually. I like doing it in the orthographic views. Okay. So right around there, and like that. So our joints roughly need to match the topology of our character. We just can't have them on a flat plane. Yeah, go ahead.
For some reason, I can't see the little bone.
Okay. So if you can't see any of your joints and your bones, the visibility of your locators, so I'm in the visibility section of my viewport properties.
Which button do you push?
So I hit the O key to bring open our viewport properties. And then I'm in the visibility section. Show locators may be turned off. That work for you, Thomas?
Oh, it says show text or locators.
Yeah, no, you're good. You're good. Oh, yours might actually be inside your wrist, which is why you're having a hard time seeing it.
I see.
Zip over to perspective and look inside your mesh and see what you get. You know, I'm going to point something out here real fast because Thomas just did it on his, and this is no fault of his own. We're working against a convention that's been established for 20 years. but it's something that I want you guys to be aware of. It'll save you a couple mouse clicks. Now, when you hit O, okay, or any form that pops over like this, you see it all over the place in Modo. What does this dot do? It's a pin, yeah. So if you click on it, you're not actually dismissing the form, right? You've now actually pinned it to your interface. So it will stay above your application frame at all times. It doesn't matter, oops, I got the tool on. It doesn't matter where you click in the interface, those viewport properties are still going to stay on, okay? So that little circle pins it. What I see people doing is they hit it twice because then that dismisses it, right? What actually happens, that every form in Modo can be dismissed just by clicking on the outside of it, okay? We don't have to click on that dot to dismiss the form. So if you find yourself clicking it twice, you're doing an extra click that's not necessary, okay? Just click off the form and it will be dismissed. And that's a really important thing to remember because did anyone download the Modo Beta? New Modo Beta 12.2.1, I believe, just went into public beta this past Friday. They're making some pretty big sweeping changes to the interface, and this idea of pinning forms is going to be a system that they're going to encourage us to do going forward. So keep it in mind. It is going to have a function now, actually. All right. So whenever we're working with our skeletal joints, we need to make sure that we're positioning them relatively where we want them to be in relationship to the geometry. I always take some direct inspiration from my actual skeletal joints themselves. The knuckles are pretty easy. The knuckles of your hand are right at the top of your skin, right? They're not in the middle of your finger. They're kind of towards the top. So I kind of generally justify all of my knuckle joints kind of up towards the top of my mesh, okay? Just gives me a little bit more of an accurate deformation of my hand when I start to bind it all together. So be inspired. You'll see this again with like the spine on your character, the location of your knee joints on your characters. Those are all joints that are at the surface of your skin, not in the center of your mass. Okay, so I have some more in here that I need to do. Let's look at my hierarchy here real fast. Here's a great trick, or let's see if you guys remember the trick. If I wanted to expand my entire hierarchy, so I got a whole bunch of joints in here in this one hierarchy, what's the keyboard shortcut that allows me to expand it all in one mighty fell swoop? This is a great one. I wish someone would have showed me this a long time ago because it would have saved me 1,000 clicks. It's the shift key. Yeah, if you shift click on any of the elements of your hierarchy, on the triangle, sorry, it expands it all, which is pretty nice, okay? And the cusses, they renamed everything for me. Yeah, thanks, Modo. For some reason, it renamed it all. Let's do this. Let's go in. All right. So at the very least, I like to give myself markers. So that's the palm. Let's rename that to palm. I know why I did this, because I put something in my prefix. This is the index finger. There we go. And then these are all the joints of the index finger. And I'm not going to go in and name all these because all I really care about is what we have here, the root, the wrist, and the palm. Because when you keep it simple like this, we can start to see the hierarchies unfold in front of us, right? Because here's the root, here's the wrist joint, here's the palm joint, and the palm joint has a hierarchy here called index, and at the moment it's got a whole bunch of joints for each of the knuckles of the fingers, right? But now I want to go in and start adding the hierarchies for the other 4 fingers, right? So where am I going to attach these new hierarchies to? The palm, And this is one of the cool things about the Modo rigging system. I actually like this. To add more joints in, I'm going to double click on my skeleton, fire off the skeleton tool. Notice that it doesn't pick a joint in here to automatically assign as the active joint, right? It allows us to do it. Now, I want to start back at the palm, so I've grabbed that guy. And it's driving me crazy here. Let's just do this finger. There we go. All right. So I'm going to start here at the palm, okay? And now I'll do palm, middle finger, palm, ring finger, and then palm, pinky finger, okay? So let's just do it real fast. I'm going to do this from the top again. So I'm back at the palm joint. I'm going to start laying joints for 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, do not worry about this line. A lot of folks freak out. They think, oh my gosh, it's broken. It's not broken, okay? Moto's always going to draw one. Oops, I hit the space bar on accident. Moto's only going to draw one of these bones for a sub-hierarchy, okay? So don't worry about it. You're actually going to see a dotted line or just a single line between the other hierarchies for the other fingers. It's not an indication that something's not working. It's just a line, okay? Remember, these things, just visualizations. They don't actually have a role, okay? The joints, big part. Bones, it's just a line, okay? All right. So let's do it one more time. I'm going to double click on the root joint since I sloppily hit the space bar. I'll fire off the skeleton tool, and once again, I'll return to the palm joint, and I'll start creating a hierarchy for the ring finger and the pinky. There's the first knuckle, second, third, termination point. Now I'm going to go into perspective here. Yep. And I'm going to start moving these things around. This is where it gets to be a little bit of a challenge. The first finger was easy, right? Because we only had one finger done. If I go to an orthographic view again, man, which one of these, I don't want to actually move the joints for the index finger. It's kind of hard to see what's going on. So this now turns into a little bit of a challenge. Let me show you a great saver. And I want to go back in time a couple steps here. And I want to show you something that's pretty rad. There's one small option that we should look to enable on our skeletal system, our skeletal tool. And it's called intersection. Intersection's great, okay? Now, the way the intersection requires us to operate is that we need to be kind of looking generally kind of down at the area that we're going to be putting the joint in. Now, what the computer is going to go do, and let me just do one. Bloop, okay. See how it's kind of in the middle? That's pretty rad. Let me do another one. Boop. See how it's kind of in the middle of the finger again? Previously, they were all on a flat plane because it was using the work plane to place all of the joints. When intersections turned on, what's actually going on, and this is pretty neat, and I'll do it one more time, kind of right here. Where I click, the computer's going to fire off a little ray, a bullet, if you will, okay? And that bullet's going to go all the way through our three-dimensional scene. It's going to basically create, it's basically going to hit the surface, and then it's going to keep going. It's going to create like an exit wound, okay? It's going to see where the bullet entered the mesh, where the bullet exited the mesh, and then it's going to find the midpoint and put the joint at the midpoint, okay? So it's a great way for us to very quickly put the joints inside of our mesh. It's going to figure out the midpoint between where the ray entered and exited. It's a good starter, at the very least. Bloop, bloop, okay? And you got to add sound effects, and I'm pretty happy with that, actually. Just doing a good spot check. Let's do it one more time. I'll go back to my palm. And with intersection enabled, I'll just orient my 3D views so I'm kind of looking down at it. Spot check, yep. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with that. Small adjustments need to be made from time to time, but yeah, it works pretty well. It gets us in the ballpark a whole lot faster than when we're doing it in the orthographic views. Back to the palm control locator, or excuse me, the palm skeletal joint. Click. Pinky's kind of weird because it's at an off axis. And then down. And then I'll make some small, quick adjustments. Something like that. All right, that's good enough for me. I'm pretty happy with it. Since we're making joints, let's go back and get the thumb in play here. Instead of returning to the palm, I'm going to return to the wrist. Let's see, maybe right about 1, 2, 3. Oop, that one kind of botched it. That's okay. There it is there. Like I said, the intersection gets us generally going. The thumb only has two 2 knuckles. So we don't need 4 joints, we only need 3. Ah! There it is. Let's drop the tool, and that's the result that I got. There's my skeleton. It's working. Ta-da! So this is the goal. This is the goal. Everyone just take a minute and get to this point, and if you're having problems, let's get those problems solved. Yeah.
I'm just curious thing is that the visualizations of the bubbles, they are determined by their size, by the what determines their size and just what the visualization of those, because I can see that it's getting smaller as I'm placing more bones.
They're getting smaller as they shouldn't actually get smaller.
I just wasn't sure, just more curious what.
Yeah, I think there's still
the relative distance.
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah, absolutely. It's the relative distance to the joint before it inside the chain, inside the hierarchy. Yep.
I wasn't sure if that was like they were just setting their scales.
Yeah, and remember, it's just a visualization. It's just they really are meaningless in the grand context of our rigging system. Yeah, Thomas, you had a question?
Yeah, I was wondering, like, a little second opinion, like how does it look so far? Like, I don't know, like, art.
Yeah, let's look at it from the top. And do me a favor, hit the O key real fast. And under drawing and control, let's turn on overlay drawing. There we go. Now we can actually see all the joints on the mesh themselves. Yeah, I think if you look at mine in comparison to yours, I have an extra joint in here. I put a joint in the middle of the palm, and that's where I branched all of my fingers from. Okay? You're branching it back down here at the wrist, which is going to give you some weird rotation, right? Because now all the fingers are going to rotate towards your wrist. They're going to do that. And the entire palm of your hand is going to be pulled back towards the wrist. So you may want to kind of restart real fast, rebuild your skeleton.
In this case, we can get into the parent and create it. No, that's to restart and create it.
I just restart it real fast. It takes 2 minutes just to redraw all the skeletal joints.
I already did. Like,
Perfect. Yeah, I know. It's pretty fast. Yep. And then just go do the fingers real quick. To answer your question, though, Yevgenia, you can go back in and retarget things and kind of break apart the skeletal joints, add stuff in the middle if you need to make a big sweeping change. In the grand scheme of things, we're just kind of working with a hierarchy, so we can unparent certain sections of this and add new joints in the middle before we bind it to the mesh.
Is there a particular reason you do a palm joint?
Yeah, and that's just to get the fingers to rotate kind of towards the palm. If they're all going towards the wrist, then it's going to look like this. It's going to pull the palm down to the wrist, which may not be the action that you're after.
Confused. Mostly because when bones work, I didn't imagine that was like something that happened.
Yeah. I mean, if you think about it, all your fingers, when they're balling, they're going towards the center of your palm, not the center of your wrist. It's little things in life, right?
Trying to figure it out.
So while you guys finish putting your stuff together, I'm just going to do some cleanup in my hierarchy. Just continue to name things. Now that I'm done creating all my joints, it's a good time to start naming things. So this is the middle. Oops. All right. Rock and roll. I'm pretty happy with this. I can see that most people, I think, are getting kind of finished with your skeleton. Oh, no. Yeah, okay. With that said, file, save. Stop, and there you go. Woo. In all honesty, this is a good place to save a version of your project file. Whenever I'm rigging something, I always create a version of my rig, or I have a version of my project file that's just the skeleton unbound from the mesh. That way, if something cataclysmically goes wrong, I can go back in and adjust the skeleton without having to, it kind of reduces it to a very, very simple state of the rig. All right. If you're done working on your skeleton, just check out what I have over here in my hierarchy, because this is a good visualization of where we're headed. Okay, you can actually start to see the rig, and the influence of all these locators kind of unfold in front of us inside the hierarchy itself. So we have the root joint. Okay, this is the master. Okay, wherever this joint goes, so goes the rest of the skeleton. Okay, it's the bottom of the tree, the grandparent of the entire rig. Every skeleton is going to have a root joint somewhere that controls the entire hierarchy. Okay. Sometimes, especially in the context of doing bipedals, it's a throwaway joint that doesn't really have a purpose. You'll see this in a second when we start doing our green dude, right? The root joint kind of turns into like a tailbone. We're never going to animate it, but there needs to be one joint that controls everything downstream inside the hierarchy. So I got my root. The wrist is next. It's connected to the root, which has two locators connected to it. One for the palm, and then the entire thumb hierarchy is parented to the wrist. And here's all the three joints that are involved in the thumb. Now, if we expand the palm hierarchy a little bit, it has 4 sub-hierarchies as well, one for each of the fingers. So we can start to see how this whole system is working and how the joints are going to influence the entire rig based off of the visualization of the hierarchy itself. Okay? We've isolated all these joints from each other. We've created a purpose behind each one of the hierarchies, and then we've isolated them so we can kind of control them independently from the rest of the rig. Okay? Which is cool. Yes, sir. Go ahead.
If you want to manipulate the joints, can you do it one by one?
Absolutely. It's a good question. So let's check it out. Now that I'm done creating all the skeletal joints, what do we do with them, right? Well, these are items just like any other items. So if we wanted to go in and maybe we oopsed a little bit, maybe we botched the location of that guy, of course we can just turn on the item transform tool and we can go on our way.
Can you move it without, can you isolate that one?
Yes, and it is child compensate. When child compensates on, okay, check it out now. This bottom hierarchy is not going to be influenced when I move its parent. Okay, so we can go in and kind of make some small adjustments and not have it influence the entire rig. Okay? So child compensate, and that's only found, well, I was about to say it's only found in the item transform tool, is it? So here's item transform with just, oh yeah, it's on the traditional move tool as well. So if you like just hitting the W key, you can turn that on, child compensate. Okay. I've gotten so in the habit of just using the item transform tool whenever I'm working in item mode. It seems to work much better than just the regular transform tool. I only use the regular transform tool, like the W key, when I'm working with components. Everything else, I use the Y key to activate the item transform tool. All right, so what do we do with this thing? Clearly, if we double-click on our skeleton, fire off like item transform, everything is selected, and child compensates on. Here, let's do this. Let's just grab the root. And with child compensate off, yeah. So clearly this is not what we're after, right? It's a pretty cool looking look at a mechanical, creepy skeleton hand, but we want our fingers of the geometry to deform and move based off the location of all of its skeletal joints. Okay? Now, we've seen this a little bit in our conversation of deformers. What we need to actually start doing here is called binding, where we glue all the verts that are around each one of the joints to the influence of the joint itself. This is called binding. Just stretching or get a question?
I got a question. So it's just an odd thing. You guys are transforming. It's coming up on the last joint on the thumb. I don't have action settings set to anything, and when I click elsewhere, it does not.
So did you double click on your hierarchy?
Yeah.
Just single left click on the root if you want to influence everything and turn child compensate off. Yeah, turn it off. And then, yeah, now the entire thing is going to come along for the ride.
So if you double click, does it select the last?
And you're going to be performing, well, you've selected everything. Okay? So if you double click on your root, see how it selects everything?
Yeah.
So when you hit the move tool, you're actually moving each one of those joints independently. Okay? And the transform information that's now being sent is being influenced by the hierarchy itself, by the parent-child relationship. This is called a double transform, where you're transforming like, the last joint in the pinky. Okay? You're transforming this, you're moving it a little bit, but you're also moving the parent a little bit, which is influencing the location of the pinky finger a little bit. It's called a double transform. Yeah, it can. It can. So we got to be careful with what we click on. Yeah, generally speaking, we're not going to be doing a double click too often anymore on our hierarchies. All right, so let's get back to where we are. So now, let's just see what we got. Yep, that's looking good. So now we need to start binding the verts of our mesh to the skeleton, because right now these are independent from each other. We did this a little bit last week when we were talking about deformers, but Moto kind of did all that wiring for us in the back end. We now need to do it a little bit more directly. Okay? Now this is a point of no return. Okay? So this is a great opportunity to save your project file. Okay? What I often do, and I think I said this earlier, is that I do a save as, right? I'll have my mesh, another version of my project file that's the mesh and the skeleton, and then I'll have a third version of my project file that's the mesh, the skeleton, and bound together to the geometry. And then usually I have a fourth version of my project file that has all the control locators and advanced rigging things in there so that I can really make it work the way I want. Make it move my puppet around. Okay? This is absolutely a point of no return. We can unbind things from the mesh. That is very doable, but there's some steps in there. Okay, sometimes it's easier to go back to the skeleton unbound from the mesh. Think of this kind of like gluing. We're going to be asking the computer to look at each vert on the geometry and find the closest locator to that vert. So it's going to do it algorithmically for us. It's going to find a vert and it's going to say, where's my closest joint? Okay, there it is. Be under the influence of the rotation of that joint. Okay, by some percentage of influence, and we'll look at that here in a second. So it's going to go through, and it's going to scan every single vert and try to assign each vert to the rotation of a joint. Okay, this process is called binding, and it's really easy to do it. But there's one critical step that we need to ensure is done before we go further, and that is to enter into setup mode. There's only a couple times that we need to be in setup mode in order for inside the rigging process. This is one of those moments. Let's enter into setup mode by clicking on the button. We get a nice yellow border around the frame. The background color changes ever so slightly, and there's a little bit of a sequence here that we need to follow. Much like we did last week with Deformers, the first thing that we have to click on is the actual skeletal system itself. So I'm going to double click on my skeletal bones, okay, which grabs every single one. We're telling the computer, take every single joint and bind it to my mesh. Okay, so we've got to make sure that all the skeletal joints are selected. Double-clicking on the root should do it. If that doesn't do it, you may want to do a nice little spot check over here inside of your hierarchy and make sure that all of your locators, all of your joints for your skeleton are selected. Okay? All right, once the entirety of your skeleton is selected, I'm going to hold down the Shift key and grab my geometry. The geometry is the last thing that we're going to click on in the bind process. Okay. Much like we did last week in our exploration of deformers, we're going back into the deformers tool area, and here it is right at the top of the toolbar, bind. Now, we were hanging out with all of these last week, and I'm looking forward to seeing your Canon animations to see how you added all of these deformers to make a cannon kind of, fire off a cartoon little cannonball or something. Did anyone do something other than a cannonball? I'm just kind of curious. Did anyone do a rubber chicken? That would have been funny. No? Okay, that's fine. If this button is gray, you're not in setup mode. Okay? It's a nice kind of double check. See when I'm out of setup mode, this button gets turned off. So if you're like, Pat, it's not on, well, you're not in setup mode most likely. Okay? Once you click the bind button, you're going to get a popover. There it is. It's way down here. And they're going to ask you what type of bind operation you want to do between the joints and the mesh itself. Now, these are algorithms. Okay? These are algorithms, and they're going to give you different results. Yeah, Grant, go ahead.
I'm in setup mode, but I can't hit the bind.
Hold the Shift key down and grab your mesh. Yeah.
Okay, I got it.
Yep. And just like we did last week, we're taking this and we're binding it to that, right? We're having this object be influenced by this deformer. We're having these skeletal joints, and they're going to be influenced by this bind algorithm, okay? So these bind types, there's 4 of them. There's really only 2 that I hang out at. Heat is magical. It's a great algorithm, okay? It does a fantastic, fantastic job of binding all the verts to an appropriate joint inside your skeletal system. If that doesn't work, and you'll know pretty instantly if it doesn't work or if it gives you a really bad result, you can go back in time, open up this new project file that you created, and then smooth distance. That will absolutely give you one. Okay, rigid is probably not a really good place to go. In smooth visible, in all honesty, I've never even used smooth visible because heat and smooth distance gets me where I'm going every single time. So let's do heat. It really is the best technology from the Foundry. Let's hit OK. Now, it may not seem like anything's happened, and some people, I can see it. If you look around, it's rainbow hands, right? If you get a rainbow hand, mission accomplished. Now, yeah, right? If you don't see a rainbow hand, there's probably one viewport property that you need to change, okay? If I hit the O key, it brings up my viewport properties. Under the active meshes section, turn on show weight maps, and then you'll probably most likely see your rainbow hand, okay?
Are you going to be constantly working with rainbow geometry?
Constantly. I hope you like colors. All right, so rainbow hand, this is our first visualization that things are working. Now, what we're seeing here, much like we saw last week with our exploration of deformers, are weight maps. They're vertex maps, okay? This time, since we have a whole bunch of joints, we have a whole bunch of vertex maps, a whole bunch of weight maps. Basically, each color is a different weight map, okay? And if you look very directly, each color represents an area of influence for a joint, right? So this joint here is the purple one. This blue band is this middle one here. This light blue is going to be the first knuckle of the index finger, okay? We're going to go in and influence these weight maps here in a second, but let's just see the immediate result. It's good to have a little confidence that this is actually working. If we deselect our geometry, or excuse me, if we deselect our skeleton and our rig, the weight maps go away. And I'm going to grab the first knuckle. You can see the weight map there applied. If you fire off item transform, what? Pat, you lied to me. You said it was going to bind the geometry to the skin. What's going on? Did anyone solve it? We're in setup mode. Yeah, if you exit setup mode, you'll be able to see the results of this bind operation. Now, if I go back in, Snap. Oh, I broke my finger. Yeah. Yeah, so it works. It works. Okay. Now I'm just going to go fire off the item transform tool real fast as you guys are starting to play with this. I want you to look very, very closely to the orientation of your tool handles in reference to the joint itself. Okay. Ideally, we want to have one of these rings going down, this, kind of parallel to the bone itself. Okay. Right now, all of the orientation of my tool handles are set to the global orientation of the XYZ axes, right? I want my tool handles to be set to the local orientation of what's selected, in this case, the joint itself. I want them to look at the local orientation of the center point of the selected joint. And there's one small button that allows us to do it, and it's way up here at the top. This is global, okay? This is local, okay? Bloop. There it goes. And now the orientation of that tool handle is set to the orientation of the pivot point of that joint, okay? And if you look very carefully, you can actually see what the tool pipe and moto is doing. All it's really doing is changing it to pivot, the action center to pivot for us, and now things get really easy to pose our character, to pose our hand. Cool, huh? Ah. I can break someone's finger. I always love breaking the bones of my character. Snap! Ow! Right? Many, many digital characters have been harmed under my control. It was great. I love breaking the bones of my digital characters. It's like at the end of the day when you need to get some stress relief out, right? Right, yeah. You just go like break the fingers of your digital characters. I remember when I worked in San Francisco, there was a program that was called Natural Emotion. And it was one of the very, very, very first ragdoll simulation programs on the market. This is back in the late 90s. And it was all programmatic ragdoll simulation. So you set up a whole series of conditions, and then you started the simulation, and your little character would be influenced by all these forces and would fall down as a ragdoll, right? And I remember many a night, all the animators would hang out just really abusing the ragdolls just to see what we could make them do, right? I remember we got really creative, like, okay, we're going to create a cube that's going to represent a building, right? And we had these little forces that you can apply to it. It's like, okay, what happens when we put the bullet force on his forehead, right? And then he's going to be flipped off the back of the building, flips over, right? Then we like put another building so he'd like break his back and then stumble down, right? It was a great way just to kind of end the evening to, digitally harm a poor little computer character. But anyways, did everyone get it to work? Yeah, everyone get their little finger, their hand to move? Yeah, Grant, what's your question? Yeah.
So is there a way to keep it like when you bend the finger, it's kind of like go flat? Is there a way to keep the weight of the
Yes.
finger itself?
Right, and that's actually the next step, and we're going to get into that here in a minute. Yeah, because it's going to take some massaging to get this to work correctly. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm having trouble with binding.
Okay.
Well, obviously, this is the problem I'm having.
Okay. Hit undo a number of times because we want to make sure that our skeleton is inside our hand, right? At some point, yeah, keep going. You moved all those joints up. Shoot, it may just be faster for you to go in and just move all those joints back down into the hand.
Like if we didn't put it in the middle, so it can impact the bind, yeah?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, so if it's not perfectly in the middle of the finger, it's going to have an influence on how the verts move. It's not a deal breaker, but it's something that we need to examine. And that's actually going to be the next thing. How do we adjust this? Because there's going to be some things that we're going to have to go in and tweak and refine and kind of get working. Okay? We're going to take a break here in a second just to illustrate some important ideas here. Very, very similarly to our Deformers exercise that we did last week. Let's go in and check out what's happened here. Because if you think about it, excuse me for a second. If you go back to last week, whenever we added a deformer to our mesh, we actually got to see the deformer inside the item list. And we actually got to see sometimes an effector or a locator that influenced the deformer itself. this time, we get a normalizing folder, okay? This normalizing folder is actually the home to all of our deformers, because if you think about it, we have a ton of these deformers in the back end of the motor rigging system, okay? Each joint is going to create its own deformer with its own weight map, okay? Yeah, right? So we get a normalizing folder. If you go into the deformer list, like we did last week, and open it up, there's the hand, or sorry, that shows which mesh item is being influenced by this normalizing folder. However, if you expand it, there it is, I hit the shift key on accident. Here are all the deformers that have been created for this rig. And there are a bunch of them in here. Here, I'm not going to minimize all these. There we go. There they all are. So we still get access to the deformers just like we did last week, but they're kind of displayed a little bit differently, okay? This also showcases quite wonderfully why we need to name things, because at times we're gonna need to go in and influence a very specific deformer, right? Something maybe has gone wrong, or we need to go in and adjust a weight map. Well, if we're seeing things in list view as we are here, you can start to understand pretty directly the importance of naming our things correctly. Because if I need to go find all the deformers for my ring finger, well, here's one right here, okay? And up and running. All right. Let's go back to the item list. Close that up. Luckily for us, the moto rigging system is pretty advanced, okay? They allow us, I still have my normalizing folder selected. This is something that I don't like about Moto. If something is selected in any one of these tabs, it's still going to be registered as selected. So I'm going to hold down the control key and deselect my normalizing folder. Yeah, which turned off the influence of all the weight maps in my 3D scene. So the next step here is to go in and spot check and continue to adjust the areas of influence for each joint itself. As a reminder, what we're doing here, or what has been created, is a weight map that's been assigned to that deformer, okay? All the verts that are red have been assigned to the influence of that joint. We get to see it. Yeah, so here are all the weight maps, okay? You can go in and select individual ones, or you can just click on the joint and it'll select the appropriate one for us. Doesn't look like it's doing it here, but we can go in and see each individual one. So there's the thumb one, sorry. Another great reason why to make sure everything's named. If you change your viewport shading style to vertex map, sometimes it gets a little bit easier to understand the influence of all of these weights. And we're going to talk about how we can adjust these weight maps and their role inside the larger rigging system maybe in a couple minutes after we take a small little break. Sound good? Everyone feeling it? Yeah? All right, let's take a small, 5-minute break, and we'll come back in and we'll start talking about weight maps, because that's the next big step in all this. All right, so let's jump back in and start exploring weight maps, okay? Whenever I work with my rigs, I always do a good spot check. Now, this is something that you absolutely have to do. You can't assume that the computer's done it correctly. I'd say 9 times out of 10, there's an error in here. Because remember, the computer is using an algorithm. It's just using some fancy math and some fancy logic to go in and figure out which verts to assign to a specific joint. It's going to mess up because it doesn't, math doesn't understand context. Okay? So we have to go in and do a spot check. This is the laborious part of rigging. This is the part that everyone hates. Lean into it. Okay? If you're only going to have to do this once, but you're going to have to do it. Okay? We need to inspect every joint. Okay? And specifically, the vertex map on every joint. Okay? Because at times, the computer is going to mess up. But let me show you a really great example of the computer messing up. Okay? Or an example of where we need to fix things. I turned off the visibility of my weight maps. So if I return to my viewport properties and under the active meshes section, show weight maps, there it is. Now I should be able to see the weight map to any of the assigned joints. And I'm just doing a spot check here. Usually, I did the heat algorithm. The heat algorithm is darn good. Here, let's do this. Okay, I'm actually going to revert my project file. This is an unbound version of this entire sequence. Okay, and I'm going to change the algorithm so I can see a mistake. Okay, the smooth distance bind type almost always produces a mistake. Let's go into setup mode and rebind this. Heat is good, but it's not always going to work. Sometimes in older meshes that has a hole or some bad geometry, the heat bind type is going to give you an error, and it says it's not closed geometry, I don't know how to bind it. Okay? Smooth distance is almost going to give you a good result every single time. All right. Our frog's back. Do you guys hear our frog in the bushes? Someone said one semester the frog jumped into the classroom, and which is why I'm keeping the door open because I want that moment to happen. Sue, you got to be Johnny on the spot. So, danger, danger. Yeah. No, I'm joking. You work at the zoo, so this is probably in your wheelhouse.
Yep, I have some frog at home. So.
All right, so here's a great example of the algorithm doing a really, really bad job. Okay, this is the smooth distance algorithm. I'm going to change my viewport shading type back to vertex map because it's really easy to see what's going on when we turn off the visibility of our shading model. Okay, so right now I have the third knuckle and my index finger selected. So any vert that's red or slightly red is being influenced by the rotation of this joint. Okay, this is not good. Just watch what happens. Let me exit setup mode. Watch what happens when I rotate just that one joint. See all this over here? Yeah. Yowzas. Okay? And it's rotating very, very oddly. Okay? This is a big time problem for us. Okay? This is a huge, huge problem for us. Shoot, even on this area, we're not even, the verts on this side of the finger aren't being influenced by the rotation of that joint. So this is why we have to go in and inspect every single joint to make sure that the computer's done or that the vertex maps are influencing the verts that we want them to influence. Okay? This is a little bit of a process. Let me show you how it works. Okay? So since we're kind of hanging out at the tip of my finger here, yep, just kind of getting comfortable, we now go into the weighting section. This is the next step in all of this. So we bind it in the Deformers section of our toolbar, and then we adjust all the vertex maps and the vertex weights in the weighting section. Okay? And you can see that there are a whole series of wonderful, wonderful weight tools that will allow us to very quickly and organically go in and adjust the vertex weights, or the paint weights as they're called, for this specific deformer. Okay? Because that's a deformer, that's a deformer, that's a deformer. I want to go in and tell the computer, hey, only influence these verts over here. Okay? Now, one of the things that's kind of a battle when it comes to adjusting the paint weights is a crazy system called normalization. Okay? And this is something that every single one of you guys are going to experience at one point or another, or the struggle of managing normalization at one point or another, okay? My black marker is gone. Okay, so we talked about this last week a little bit, but now this has come home to roost because it's an important idea. Each vert can be influenced along a scale of 0% influence to what value? 100% influence. We saw this last week when we were messing with our deformers, right? When we were making those vertex maps, okay? Now that we have probably, 15 or so deformers active on this rig, we need to go in and make sure that the normalization of that vert is correct, okay? So over here, I'll focus my energy over here, okay? All of these verts, I want to set their influence to a value of 100%. So that way, when I move this joint, all of these guys rotate with it at the exact same value, at the exact same rate, okay? I don't want all of these over here to move, right? Right now, since these verts on my middle finger are being influenced, and let's go in and inspect it a little bit, because we can actually do this. Let's see, I'm going to go into vert mode. There we go. I'm going to select some verts. And let's see. Oh, golly. There's a way, and I've forgotten off the top of my head. Let's do adjust weights. Okay, when you turn the adjust weights tool on, it will show you the current influence on the selected deformer. Now keep in mind, wherever the center point is, so that right there is the deformer that I currently have selected, the joint, right? That joint is influencing these two verts at a very small percentage, right? So that vert is being influenced at 13, and change percent, 12 and change percent, okay? So when I rotate that joint 90 degrees, these verts are going to get 13% of that 90-degree rotation. Everyone feeling me so far? Seeing the math? Okay? Clearly, I don't want these verts to be rotated at all, right? I don't want these to be influenced by the rotation of that deformer. Okay? So I need to go back and reassign these verts to have 0% influence on that deformer. Okay? Before I go any further, though, I'm going to select maybe this joint over here, and I want to see the percentage of influence of this joint. Each vert inside of our rig can only be influenced between 0 and 100% by the entire rig, okay? These two that I have selected are being influenced. Test. Sorry. Russia has launched like nuclear weapons. That's what I'm always expecting, right? Duck and cover, aliens have invaded. Did you guys see that thing? This is how I enjoy the internet. I think the internet culture is just fantastic. And I love that we have all of these like hobby astronomers out there that have like fancy telescopes and really cool gear pointed at the sun. I saw something on the internet the other day that a couple people found an alien invading force exiting the sun, which I thought was awesome. And they had video where they had these little lines come out. And they're like, hey, look, there's an alien armada coming out of the sun to just like suck the resources out of our sun. I'm waiting for that text message to arrive. Duck and cover, aliens are invading. Okay, anyways. So back to the normalization idea. So each vert can only be influenced to a maximum of 100%, okay? This vert here, 13.1%, is being controlled by that guy over there. I bet you anything, if I select this joint here, it's going to be 87%, okay? So 13 plus 87 gets me to 100, right? Each vert can only be influenced to a maximum of 100%, but we can break up that percentage across a number of different deformers, okay? Let's test the theory, and I really don't know if it's specifically this one. So I've selected that deformer. It's likely not. But let's go back to those exact same two verts. I still got them selected, and we'll do adjust weights. Yeah, so here, 100% of the available influence, 13 of it is spent on this guy over here, 21 and 23% is spent on this guy over here. I bet you if we keep going, yep, same two verts. See how they're still red? Adjust weights. Yeah, another 20% is being influenced by this one. So I need to now go in and make sure that these verts are assigned to the correct joint and at the correct rate. Okay? We can break up the influence across multiple deformers, but we can only ever have a total influence to a maximum of 100%. Okay? Now what this looks like for us, it's kind of a laborious process, and it requires us to go in on every single vert map. But it can go pretty fast. So I have this joint down here selected. A great place to start is the termination points. You shouldn't have any influence on the termination points. Okay? Great. All the tips look like they're 0. So now let's go to that joint right there. Now I only want to have, well, I definitely want to have these verts. Okay? Now what I've done here is that I've selected the joint. Okay? And then I go into my vertex selection state. It keeps that deformer selected for me, which is kind of nice. Okay? And FYI, if it's easier, you can also do this in like polygons. Okay? Because polygons really have 4 verts assigned to them. You're doing the exact same thing. And I want to start adjusting the values. So let's do adjust weights. And what I like to do is that I like to put this at 100% and turn off additive. Okay, we don't want to add 100% in there. We want to replace the values that are currently there. All right, so there we go. Looking pretty good. I'm happy with that. Actually, I'm going to return to that selection, and I want to invert it. And once again, I want to adjust the weights back down to 0. You can also left-click and drag. That's what it should look like. Okay. Now, when I rotate that joint, what polygons are going to move? Just those. Okay. Just those in there. Now we probably should have some sort of fall off in here. Okay. A nice smooth band. Yeah, so I really would love it to probably go from 100% and this one over here. I don't know. Let's see. What do you want to do? We'll have, actually, let's do this. This will be 0. We'll have this row be 50. That way we're getting a nice fall off, a nice smooth gradient away. Let's rotate it now. See what we get? Yeah, that's better. That's better. It's looking pretty good. Folds are okay. A lot of people think folds are bad, but our skin folds, by the way. If you look carefully, it actually folds and collapses in on itself. So it's okay to get some folds in there. Yep, that's okay. I'm happy with that. So we need to rinse and repeat this idea over and over and over again. I'm just going back in time. Let's look at this guy. Whew. That's no fun. Let's go back into our vertex shading map. Now, what area of our mesh do we want to have rotate when we rotate that knuckle?
The center section of the finger?
Yeah, so basically all of this jazz in here. Okay. So we're defining areas of influence by the deformer itself and the percentage of influence. There we go. So let's do, those are the ones that I absolutely, actually I take that back. I want to put these at 50%. So those in here, I want to adjust to 100%. Just left click and drag, it assigns it to 100%. Oops. And then I want to invert it and adjust everything else to 0. So I get this lovely band. Yeah. Heat does such a better job of understanding like the curvature of your mesh and assigning the weight maps appropriately to the corresponding joints. Smooth is basically just going to get a distance, right? It's going to look at the joint and it's going to go almost a defined distance outward and grab every single vert within inside that zone and assign it to the influence of that joint. So it's kind of sloppy.
Is that why with heat I'm sort of getting like the tip of the finger is 100% ingredients out, even a little bit up to the second knuckle, because like, and when I activate the transform tool and move it, it sort of bends
Yeah.
like a finger would.
You got it.
You can't just bend like one knuckle and
Yep.
keep the rest of your finger static.
Yep, and heat does a great job of blending all these weight maps together to get a nice series of deformation. In certain situations, heat's not going to work, right? Yeah, that's fun. Okay. So this is working the way it should work, right? On the surface, you're probably going, Pat, this does not look right at all. But this is the problem that we have. We didn't finish the job, okay? And here's what I would recommend that you do. Start at the back. I'm starting at the front, okay? I got to start in the back. It's really best to start at the top of your hierarchy versus the bottom of your hierarchy, because then you can really understand, if you're adjusting the weight maps, then you can really understand what it is that you're trying to establish, okay, and how these are all influencing each other, okay? Like specifically for that one in there, I want the area that I'm looking for to be kind of in here, maybe a little bit that way. Yeah, there we go. I'm just going to initially set this to 100%. Flip it, set it to 0% with adjust weights. Okay, and let's just see how that is beginning to influence. Okay. How am I setting it to 100? So if you select any joint, okay, I'm going to go into my polygon selection state. Just grab those handful right there, okay? Adjust weights is great because it will tell you the current assigned weight to the verts on the selected edge. In the tool properties, you could manually go in bloop, and change it, okay? Or you just left click and drag. Left click and drag will go all the way to 0 or 100%. The opposite direction will go to 0. So it makes it really fast to dial it in. All right, so I got a bug in here. And this is where people get frustrated because they'll start doing, they'll be working down this thing, be going, yeah, this is awesome, this is looking good, I'm getting the bands of control that I'm after, and then we do this. And he goes, Pat, I give up. I don't understand this. Why is this doing what it's doing? I thought I fixed all this problem. But remember, the influence of each vert is probably, it can be split amongst all of the deformers on the rig. So we now need to go in and find the culprit, the joint that's actually grabbing some of these things in here. Okay? Bingo. It's that guy right there. See how I grabbed that vert? This part's red. So the reason why my finger's breaking is because this joint isn't moving. Okay? The influence of the verts are being spread across all of the deformers. So when there's a bug, we got to go find the bug. It's not going to tell us which deformer is causing the problem. We have to manually go in and inspect it. Look, all of these fingers on my middle finger are influencing the rotation of this part of my guy. Shoot, this one here is actually influencing, I can see it, my thumb. So let's go and fix it real fast just so we can maybe get it going the direction we want to go. Put all this to 0. Oh, that's looking better. Grab the next one down. Go into my polygon selection state. Grab all those guys. Just weights to 0. Okay, now we're getting there. Oh yeah, look at that. How'd that work? Just weights to 0. This is smooth distance. And even then, I don't have it working. There's another one in here that's grabbing it. Let's put the rotation back to 0. Oh, and I goofed. That's a bug. I forgot to grab these guys. Sometimes it's user error. And with me in front of a class, it's often user error. Okay, we're getting there, but something is still influencing those verts. I gotta go find it. So that guy, yeah, it's my thumb. Gah. Thumb. Come on now. There it is. Oops, I put it to 178. I want it to 0. Okay. So that guy. Oops, I clicked off it. So this is the frustrating part about, yeah, it's the palm joint that's influencing these things. Go figure. Smooth distance requires a little bit of work, okay? A whole lot of work. But, you know, yeah, look at that. Gah. After a while, we'll get there. It just takes a little bit of love. Yeah. Sometimes I feel like the easiest way, when heat is going to be magical, but sometimes heat doesn't work, right? Sometimes I feel when you do smooth distance, I'd just rather than say, just put all the influence levels at 0. Okay? It'd be faster if I just go in and define the range of control first by myself, instead of having to go back in and retarget and find which ones are causing the bugs. Yeah, it's probably every finger. And that may be because of just my sequence here that I'm following. Yeah, it's in here somewhere. I'm not going to continue to go through it. But this is what we have to do in order for us to get this working the way we want it to work. What we're after when it comes to our weight maps are bands of control. Okay? Ah, it's that guy. No, it's not. Oh, wait, is it just user error? It's just user error. That's my fault. Yeah. See how these two joints, nothing is influencing the rotation of those. So I need to go in and define it. Maybe, oh, it's funny. So with both of them selected, sometimes you can get a good understanding of which row it is that you need to affect. So let's go back. I'll put that one at 50%, and I'll also assign it 50% to the joint below it. That way we get a nice kind of deformation here. Yeah, there it is. So this is what paint weight looks like. We've got to go in and see which zones. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. We've got to go in and define these little bands of control. Okay? Generally, those bands are right around the joint itself. Okay? For you guys that had heat, let me revert this back to previous state. Redo the bind real fast. This time I use heat. Excuse me. Okay, so if you look at heat, heat does a really good visualization of what these bands of control should look like. Okay, so down here, on our index finger, this joint is the purple. Okay, just the purple verts are being influenced by the rotation of this guy. This middle blue, this dark blue, is being influenced by this joint right here. So whenever that joint moves, only these blue verts are going to rotate, and so on and so forth throughout the entirety of the rig. You can adjust these manually, okay, as we were doing with the adjust weight tools. I find that a really fast way of going in and targeting which verts are going to be influenced by which joints, okay? However, there's also some really great painting tools that allow you to do the exact same thing, okay? And I'm going to grab just this one guy. Let's test it. Let's rotate it around a little bit. Yep, that's looking pretty good, but maybe I want it to, I don't want, see how it's kind of pink over here? Don't want that much deformation on my ring finger when I move my index finger. So I want to go in and kind of subtract that influence from the rotation of that joint. So you're more than welcome to go in and use adjust weights. I find adjust weights really easy because I'm just saying this vert is targeted to this percentage of influence, right? You can do the exact same thing organically with your paint system, okay? So we can go in and paint the weight values. I'm going to use a soft brush. And so right now, I'm painting in a value of 50%, okay? Let's put it to 0%. If you right-click and drag, you'll adjust the size of your paintbrush. Now, once I start hovering in, of course it's not doing it for me. Why is it not doing it for me? Here, let's do this. Oh, I'm in paint. So this is simple math that my brain's not working right. So the current assigned weight values for those verts, let's see what they are. Just weights, somewhere at 0. Maybe it's these verts over here. Oops. These verts, what is it? It could be that guy. Well, excuse me? Or did I just nuke the influence of that thing? No. Although I really did flatten it. Oh, this is awesome. Yeah, now it's no longer showing me my weight maps. Thank you, Moto. This is bugging out right now. Vertex map. Let's select it. Let's really make sure it's selected. Oh, golly. Here we go. Oh, yeah. Somehow I nuked all of it. Good job, Pat. Well done. I'm awesome at this. Let's see. Yeah, why did it go back to 0? I must have accidentally hit the adjust weights on all of that stuff. Okay, well, anyways, point being, you can go in with your paint system, and I was painting in a value of 0%. So if a vert had 90% associated with it, I was painting in 0% on top of that, so it wasn't actually changing anything, right? Because it's additive, right? It's only going to add value. It's not going to take it away. My bad. I can do, so here's what I'm going to do. I'll do set value with my paintbrush. And I don't want these verts over here to be influenced. And let's see. There it goes. So we can just go in and paint it real fast, and it takes away the influence. And actually start to show you in the viewport what it looks like. This is a really great organic way of painting in the influence. And of course you can go in and you can also smooth it out a little bit too. So if you hit smooth, it'll start to blur and soften that weight value across the diameter of your brush. But it's a really cool, fast way of going in and organically painting it. Because some people like selecting verts like I do. Some people like painting it. There we go. That works pretty well. Let's drop the tool so I don't accidentally change anything again like I did last time. And now when I rotate it, yeah. Now the index finger isn't moving when I go in and make an adjustment. So here's what I want you guys to do to just kind of explore this idea, because this is something that we're absolutely going to be doing. If you have a different version of your hand already done, rebind it using smooth distance and explore this process just for a couple minutes, just so you can get used to going in and adjusting the paint weights and seeing how this normalization process is influencing the deformation of your fingers. Sound good? Yeah, Melissa. Yeah. So if you want to unbind, so unbinding is kind of a little bit of a process, but you can do it. So much like we did earlier, I'm going to go back up into setup mode. Much like we did last week, we need to delete and remove that normalizing folder, okay? Because this folder has all of the deformers in it, right? Let me zoom out some. Because here's our deformers right there. So if we physically just delete that entire normalizing folder, we've deleted all the deformers, we've deleted all the vertex, all the vertex maps are still there, but we've deleted all the deformers that are using those vertex maps. That's a fast way of getting in and getting and unbinding your mesh, because now there's physically no longer transform deformers in your scene. Yep. See? That are deforming the mesh.
And my second question is, I left off the fingertips. Is there a way to add them after the fact?
Say again?
I left off the fingertips. I was literally just putting it where the knuckles were.
Yeah. For the skeleton itself? Yeah. So you want to have the skeleton pre-dialed before you bind it. So if you didn't, delete that normalizing folder. Okay? You have to rebind it, and then just double-click on your skeleton, run your skeleton tool, and you can continue to add joints into the fact, in after the fact. Yeah, as long as it's unbound. So delete that normalizing folder. Double click on the root of your skeleton. Okay, I always do it in the viewport just to grab it. It's real easy. And then with the entirety of your skeleton selected, you can return to the skeleton tool and add more joints into your hierarchy. Yeah, well, you know, a good practice, in all honesty, is to save out a new version of your project file once the skeleton's created. And then once everything's bound and you're happy with the paint weights, save out another version, okay? That way, if you have to go back to the skeleton, you have a dedicated project file that's just the skeleton without the normalization and all the deformers in there. And you also have a version of your rig that has just the deformers and the skeletons in play. Everyone try smooth distance real fast and see what you get. It takes some experience, admittedly. Yes, ma'am.
I'm trying to use set value and kind of place, this part, but it didn't work, so
Okay, cool. So you have it selected here, which is awesome. Now, if we switch over to, like, let's say polygons, see how it keeps the selection of that joint? Now we're able to go in and grab the polygons in that area. Like, yeah, perfect. Cool. I like adjust weights. And then once you see how it already put them to 0? Because that's associated with the property over here. Good.
so it's good.
That's good. That's what we're after. Yep, that's good.
But okay, how to use the paint?
Same idea. Same idea. So you have this joint still selected. You can go, I like set value. Now with your right mouse button, right click and drag out, and it'll change the size of your brush. Right mouse button and drag. Ooh. Right, you're doing left.
Right.
Right. Yeah, so now we're making the brush tip bigger. And now wherever we paint is setting it to that value. Yeah, so right, there you go.
Got it. So
Cool, huh?
we have to be in polygon or no?
For this one, you don't necessarily have to be in polygons, right? Because we're not actually selecting polygons, we're influencing the vertex maps. Yeah, good, cool.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
I'm trying to figure out how to do the whole weight thing
Uh-huh.
with, with the...
Okay, good.
Yeah, I know, but it's just the weight, like...
It's not working, right, yeah. Okay, so let's do this. Let's change our viewport from default to vertex map. That way we can see the vertex maps. There they are, okay? Great. Now if you orbit to the top of your hand for a second, you can see, yeah, we can see that we have a lot of influence over here. It's kind of red.
Mm-hmm. So, paint,
Do set value.
set value. Okay.
Its value is 0%, so basically going to be turning off the influence of those verts. Now if you use your right mouse button, you drag with your right mouse button, it'll change the size of your brush head.
Okay, like this.
Right mouse button and drag. That's left mouse button.
Oh, this one?
That's the one. There you go. Now drag to the right. See how it makes it bigger? It may be too big. You want to keep it pretty small. Yeah. Now paint like right in here. Yeah. See how it turns off the influence? Sets those verts to 0%? Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Yes, of course.
So here's like a parent for the finger, and even if I move, it doesn't move the whole.
Okay, let's see what's going on here. Go ahead and drop your tool and select just that joint. Okay, here's something that I do, because I think what you're actually selecting is the center point of the joint. See how you're kind of in the center point selection mode? Yeah. See how it's all orange now?
It was
Now rotate. Let's see what we get. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so this is working the way it's supposed to work.
but still not.
Yeah, so you may have to click on this joint here and see what you get. Yeah, see, look at all the influence up here that this joint has created.
The same issue with
Same issue. And this is what the issue that I was going through. I had to go through and like every joint and see which verts are assigned to which joint. It is a problem, admittedly. Yeah.
I like how this painting tool works. It's all visually.
Good. I think that says something about the tool set. For visual people, it works. For mechanical people, it works too. Yes, sir.
So I'm doing that with just weights. Like in here it says negative 100.
Yeah.
But on the verts it says just
0%.
0%.
Right.
So
Or what's it saying?
it's a 0. It just says 0%.
0%. That's what we're after. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
like,
That's good. Put that at 0. There you go.
But then it brings back the weight mass.
Ah, okay. I see what's going on here. We're doing some math. Right now it's additive. So right now it's adding 0% on the currently assigned value for all of these verts. If you turn off additive, now we're setting it.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep. Yes, sir. Okay, what's up? I'm coming. I had to doing 3 things at once. Well, let's not get ahead of ourselves. I am.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what am I doing? What am I looking
Okay, cool. So right now you have this knuckle selected. Everything that's red is going to be influenced by the rotation of that joint. So if you were to rotate that joint, just go ahead and do it right now. Yep. See how this finger is moving a little bit, because these verts over here are currently assigned, a percentage of their value is currently assigned over here. So what we need to do is we need to go and turn all of these off, okay? And we only want small bands of influence around our joints, okay? So that's what we're doing. Let's do it. Let's do it simply, okay? Go into the weighting section and use the set value brush. Okay, now we're going to turn the values at 0%. So wherever we brush, we're going to assign those verts to a value of 0. If you use your right mouse button and drag, you'll change the diameter of your brush. That's good. Something like that. Now just paint over here. See how we're turning them off? Okay. We probably want to do something similar down here, right? Because we only want these, to be in. So all the stuff, yeah. See, oh, yeah, look at that. Okay, drop your tool and test it. Rotate the finger now, see what you get. It may be a little funky, so we have a little work we had left to do. But look, now this finger isn't really moving. I think there's maybe a vert or 2 on the underside, but we're getting there, right? And we have to do that for every single joint. Yes, sir.
Okay. So why is it doing this?
Okay, let's find out. Go ahead and select your joint.
Which one?
Doesn't matter. Okay, and let's change your viewport shading style to vertex map so we can see the actual weight maps themselves.
So I haven't binded it yet.
Oh, well, there you go. You got to bind it, right?
But why is it like?
Okay.
Going back and
Okay.
forth here?
When you go into the setup mode, you're returning the transformations of all of your joints back to their original state.
Right.
If you go into your properties tab, for that, select that joint. So it's putting the rotation values back to 0. See how it's 0, 0, 0. Exit setup mode. It's 37%. If you were to put that to 0, now it's back.
Sweet.
Yeah, pretty
Okay,
cool.
Thank you.
Yes.
Did you have this set to 0 or?
Here's what I did. I did set value. Yes, and see now it's down at 0. Cool. If you put your, see the black circle? That's your brush head. If you were to right mouse button and drag, it's going to increase the width. Right mouse, you're doing left. Yeah. There you go. Now paint on the middle finger. Keep going. Keep going. Go all the way down
Oh, I see. It is
Yeah,
coloring.
it's turning them off. Yeah, it's going to a value of 0. Try to get on the inside a little bit. Is it turning it off? I'm not so sure.
Wait.
What's going on?
It's not doing anything.
Yeah. Let's drop the tool. Yeah, something's
Whoa,
weird
what
because
in
it.
the world?
Let's try.
Oh, so
Now
it's
we're good.
wigging.
It's wigging out. Okay. Select a different joint. Any one doesn't matter. And let's select back the one that you're working on. Cool. Now let's try it again. Set value. That's good. Make your brush bigger. Oh, looks like it's pretty big already. That's good. Now start painting. Let's see what we get.
Supposed to do that?
Yep, that's fine. Cool. Now we're doing it the wrong. That's actually what we want for that finger. Do it over here too.
And it's not doing.
Okay. Well, you're holding the. Or you can do left or right.
Oh wait, am I supposed to do right or left?
Left when you're painting. Right just changes the size.
Left when I'm painting.
Okay.
Oh good, I was doing the right one.
Yeah, that's weird. That's not doing that one, but it did it down here.
And
Huh.
when the knuckle, but math, should it be more red where right where the knuckle?
Right where the
is?
knuckle is. Yeah, a little
Right on
bit.
top
Yep,
of it,
I would agree.
fading
Mhm.
in between and
Yep.
then- okay.
Totally agree. Yeah, because if you think about it, when you move that knuckle, you want a little bit below and a little bit above to move a little bit. Yeah.
Okay.
So there's some artistry here for sure.
How can I select this joint and other joint? So
Hmm. You're in your polygon selection state. Just click on polygons and you go back into item mode. And now you can select different joint. Yeah.
okay, and how do you duplicate the viewport
Yeah. Hold down your control key
control?
and then left click and drag on the dot that way. Now mouse up. Now we have 2.
Here we go. And
Yep.
delete it if I don't need it.
Yep. If you right click on the dot and then delete. Yeah. There you go. All right. Okie dokie artichokes. Yes, sir.
If I paint more than what I want, how do you, get it back without having to do control Z? Can you?
If you paint more than what you want, okay, how do you get it back?
If I take the red, let's say you take all the red off.
Yeah, you want to put the red back on.
Yeah.
Put in your tool options, put the value to 100%. And then you'll be painting in influence.
Oh.
Yeah. When it's at 0, we're subtracting. 100% is adding. Yes, sir. Ma'am, I apologize. Who said that? That was a habit.
So I just played with that, right?
Okay.
How do I get rid of it? If I don't want it anymore, can I just go
Let's
in
see.
and delete it? Or
Get rid of what? Let's be specific.
the painting, the
Okay.
set value.
Ah, okay. So you wanted to like remove the influence on this? Is that what we're trying to do?
Well, I was trying to paint with it, but it wasn't doing anything. So
Okay.
then I was just going to try to delete it and start over, but I don't.
I don't think
Is
you
that
need
not
to do
something
that. You can also try erase. Maybe same idea. Now it should automatically just put it to 0. Try erasing in there. Yeah, something's going on with yours. I'm not sure why that one is not going back down to 0. Here's another thing you could do. If we get out of the whole paint system, I want you to go into your polygon selection state and grab those polygons on the inside of that finger. Yeah, grab all of those. Perfect. Let's do adjust weights. Okay, now we want to adjust it to 0, so let's just click.
Oh, wait.
Yeah. Oh, and let's turn off additive. Yeah, now it set it to 0, which was good.
Oh, right on.
Cool. You know, that may have been what was going on.
Is it-
So additive is going to add 0% on top of whatever's there.
Oh, and I was painting and nothing was happening.
Yeah, that may have been what was going on with the set value. Additive may have been on. So we were trying to add 0% to an existing value, which is not going to do anything.
Okay, awesome. I'm like, what in the world? Awesome.
Cool.
Oh,
Yes, sir.
Oh, sorry. Can you paint out of setup mode?
Yes, absolutely.
I
Yep.
just want to make sure that wasn't restricted.
Did you say there was an invert selection tool?
It's not a tool, it's just a keyboard shortcut.
Keyboard.
Open braces.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So much.
Yeah, that's a good one, isn't it? Yeah.
I want to be able to right click on Photoshop.
Alrighty, folks, let's just get back together just for 1 second. I know you guys are having fun with your paint weights, okay? And I want to start exploring what we're going to be doing for our homework this week. Now, the green dude is someone that we're going to be hanging out with for a couple weeks, okay? This is going to be our primary kind of exploration, our lab, if you will, for the next couple weeks as we start to get really into the whole character rigging process. So, point being, save a master version of this project file, the raw project file, because you're going to be coming back to this. You're probably going to want to keep, you know, an untouched version of this asset somewhere on your own hard drive. Okay, I'm providing this rig to you, or this model to you. At the very least, remember that you can go get the original right here inside of the homework. Okay, so this week, your goal is to do a basic skeleton and adjust all the paint weights for this guy. Okay, now there's a couple ideas in here that we'll want to look at, especially in the construction of our skeleton, that will help us quickly get a super accurate result. So here's our little green dude, okay? Some ideas in here that you'll definitely want to make sure that you practice and you apply in your rig itself. We want to make sure that we're creating a rig that seamlessly flows into kind of a traditional animation pipeline. Animators out there are looking for certain joints in certain areas. There is kind of a general consensus as to where all these bipedal joints need to go. And if you return to the week 6 module on Canvas, I've given you guys a nice little indication as to where all those joints need to be. Okay, and I've even named them for you quite directly. You're welcome. Okay? This is where we're going to begin this week. The feet are going to get a tremendous amount of attention next week. Okay? Definitely bring a notepad next week. Next week's going to be a heavy week. Okay? Yes, sir. Oh, no, put joints in there. Not the toes, yeah. Unless you don't need to see, I mean, in this rig, you don't actually see the toes. He's kind of wearing, like, shoes. All we're looking for in the feet, if you don't see the toes, is kind of this action, so you can bend the foot in the middle. That's all we're really going for. This, you actually see the hands, okay? So you want to put joints in the hands. We'll talk about the face specifically going forward, so we're just going to get kind of head controls for it with the basic skeleton, with the idea that maybe we'll go in with some morph maps and start creating some more customized controls for the face. Okay. All right. So here are the basic joints and their relative basic two-dimensional layout. This is a good place to begin. Kevin, I'm blowing your mind here.
What's the numbering of the spine? Why is it kind of wacky that way?
Oh. This is a mistake. I don't think I've noticed that before. Yeah, it should be spine 1, spine 2, 3, 4, so yeah. This is not taking care of my 3 a.m. brain. I probably did this at 3 a.m. while I was holding my baby a couple of years ago. Yeah, no, that's just an error. I'll try to make sure I fix that, so going forward, that's not something we have to worry about. It should say spine 1, 2, 3, 4, great catch. Kevin gets the gold star for the day. Would it be like super condescending to have like a gold star chart like we had in kindergarten? Would that be like super condescending for adults? Like, and then you like every time you do something, you get a gold star for the day, and then like at the end of the year, the person with like the most gold stars gets like a cool little eraser or something, right? A pencil, a cool pencil eraser. That's super condescending for adults. I don't know. I'm kind of the idea that we should always return to kindergarten when it comes to the things that we do. Anyways, okay, so use this as a guide, okay, as to where all the joints are going to go. And if you look at the guide here, there is some symmetry between the left side and the right side of the body that we want to make sure that we're following, okay? The structure for both the the left and the right side is identical, okay, and we want to make sure that the joint placement is close to as identical as we make it. There's one option inside the skeletal tool system that I want you guys to check out that will help. Yeah, it's the symmetry mode, and this is where it's all about. Now, I'm just looking at my green dude from the front, and let's just start throwing down some skeletal joints, okay? At times, this is actually something that I like to do they've changed the default behavior when you're in item mode to automatically turn off all your wireframes, okay? But when you're rigging and you're placing down skeletal joints, having your wireframes on is probably a really great idea. Let's see, and it's this value right here, the wireframe overlaid. If this is to none, you're not going to see your wireframes. Now, I had mine unselected, which is why we weren't seeing the wireframes. But just make sure that you can see your wireframed, and oftentimes it's just this value right here, okay? Because when you're seeing the wireframes, it's going to help you determine where these joints are going to go. Ideally, we want to have joints that are kind of in the middle of an edge loop, because those edge loops kind of turned into like hinge points for the deformation of our character. It's a good place to be. It's a good place to start, at least, okay? All right, so let's get this party started. One thing, we need to have a root joint, okay? It's kind of the tailbone area. It's a throwaway joint. We're never actually going to animate it, but there has to be some joint inside of our character that controls everything, the root of the tree. So I like, if this is the hips, this is kind of the tailbone area right in there, okay? And I'm going to do this real fast. So here's the hips, right about there-ish. We go root, hips, and then spine 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, hips, spine. Let's see, 4 is going to be up here. So spine 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. Actually, probably 4 is down here because that's going to be base of neck. I'm just going to evenly space these out, trying to get their general landing spot on the edge loops. That way we get nice deformation. So that's spine 4, neck base, neck top, and then top of head. Okay. All right. So there's my spine. I had intersection on when I was creating these, but you may want to go in, and this is a good practice, and position these, especially the spine, closer to the back of your character. That way, we're getting a realistic rotation for the spine. Yeah, somewhere right around in there. That's pretty good. That's a pretty good little start. Spine 4 is going to be maybe a little bit more justified towards the back. Then I try to put top of the head right there at the top of the head. Okay? That's pretty good. Some people put the root actually in the tailbone, which is just fine. It really is. This is a throwaway joint, but we need to have it there. Okay? It's not going to have any influence, any weight map influence on our rig. Okay? So that's a pretty good little skeleton to begin with, but now what we want to do is maybe go in and plot out the legs. And I'll do one leg, and this is the magic of the moto rigging system, is this symmetry tool. So earlier, I suggested that you turn symmetry off. When you're done making the spine, turn it on the x-axis and watch what happens. I want all of my legs to be branched from the hips themselves, okay? Because naturally, wherever the hips move, okay, your legs are going to go along for the ride, okay? You lower your hips, you lower the actual legs themselves. Now check this action out. I do one. Did I turn symmetry on? Of course, it's going to break for me. Nope, there we go. There's the knee, ankle, ball of foot, toe of foot. Okay? The cool thing about symmetry is that it did both sides at the exact same time. With symmetry on, any edit that you make will be made to both at the exact same time. Okay? So I can pull it out, and it really is symmetrically adding that in, which is kind of nice. Now for the knees, you want to put the joint kind of more towards the front where the kneecap actually resides on the mesh itself. As a reminder, you want to have a good ankle. In my imagination, it's that little knobby round thing that you can feel on your foot. That's where we're putting the joint. And then next week, we'll talk about the role of the ball of the foot and the row of the toe of the foot. Okay? So have symmetry on. It really helps. Okay? In addition, let's look at our hierarchy. You're going to have a lot of joints in this guy. Okay? But when we have our symmetry on, it's going to give it a nice little suffix of left, right. I'm going to guess that this is the left hip, and I was right. This is the right hip, okay? And all of those are influenced. Let's just collapse those hierarchies. And all of those are influenced, yeah, by that guy, okay? So when we move that one up and down, let me turn off or turn on our global rotation. Yep, the hips will go along for the ride. See how the root doesn't change its location? That's fine, okay? If we were to grab the root and translate it inside the three-dimensional scene, the entire thing goes up and down. And then you do the same for the shoulders. And of course, we already talked about the branching of the fingers themselves, okay? This is going to be a pretty intricate rig as far as the skeleton is concerned. Pay really, really close attention to your paint weights. I want you guys to go in and start adjusting the paint weights for this rig over the course of the next 7 days. It's going to take some time. Expect to spend an hour on the paint weights. It's a stupid, laborious process, but it's one thing that we just can't avoid. It's part of our system, okay? It's one of those moments, if you've taken my game art class, it's like UV mapping. You just put your headphones on and you just sit down and you just grind through it. It takes an hour, but if you're careful, you're only going to have to do it once, okay? And then you can just move on. If you're careful with your paint weights, once they're done, and you'll never have to adjust them again. So it's an important foundation for the rest of the rig. Yeah.
So far as the weights are concerned, you really just weighting out the joints.
It's just the joints, yeah, just the joints. Okay.
So if we use heat to bind it,
Mm-hmm.
it gives us a pretty solid, accurate representation of what we're going for. It's going to be more touch-up and less like
Complete, yeah, you got it. Yeah, you still want to go in and just double check. And how are we double checking the influence of all of our joints? Yeah, I love your hand signals, Kevin. So just rotate them. That's the fastest way. If heat's giving you a really good result and you're pretty happy with it, you still want to go in and double check. Physically grab each joint, rotate, rotate, rotate. See if anything is rotating incorrectly. Move on to the next joint. Yep. Kind of have to hand test it. Sometimes when I was working for MTV, we were using motion capture animation for all of our stuff, for most of our stuff. And we had a really great motion capture file that was our test of our paint weights. And it was, I think, a dancer that was doing this really cool, I think if I remember correctly, the motion capture clip that we caught was this dancer warming up for her performance on the motion capture stage. And it was a dancer like stretching, doing this, okay, touching her toes. And then I think she like did this motion with her arms, like big windmills. And we threw all of our characters into that motion capture file to see if the paint weights were working. Because if we got any sort of weird stretching or inflations or deformations that were kind of ugly, that file would tell us instantly, right? For us, we don't have access to that file or any really great motion capture capacity, so we'll have to do it by hand. Yep.
What if you got
Motion Builder? Yeah, that's the actual app that we used was Motion Builder. Yeah, it's a great app. There was a time when I was suggesting to the school for us to buy a motion capture system, but then it came to, hey, where are we going to put a $100,000 motion capture system? And we went, oh yeah, I guess we need like a studio or something, right? Because we can't put all the cameras in here because then it just wouldn't work. Yeah, I would love to do more motion capture. It's a tremendous amount of fun. It's pretty advanced though. It's not for the faint of heart. It requires a tremendous amount of setup. You have to be a master rigger, and you really have to understand that pipeline to get mediocre results. And then to get the best results, you have to be a ninja, because it's not easy. Yeah, at the time, it was stupid hard. Now it's just hard. Yeah, we're getting better at it. Maybe in 10 years from now, it will be just kind of It's semi-hard, right. It'll be intermediate level. All right, is everyone understanding the goal for this week's homework assignment? So skeleton and all the paint wakes, and get some sleep too. Babysit your renders for your Canon if you're not done.
So, like, what exactly what can this guy do?
don't have to animate them, but I would move the joints after you've done all the paint weights to see if you're getting the type of bending and the deformation that you're after. Yeah. All right, other questions? All right, we've got about 20 minutes. You guys can go ahead and get started.